From Elliot Page flatlining Sony's big sci-fi gamble to Ezra Miller turning DC's reset button into one of the most expensive bombs ever made. Here's every woke trans actor career flop explained. Sony thought Elliot Page could carry a sci-fi remake of Flatliners and maybe even kickstart a new franchise. Instead, the movie flatlined harder than the characters inside it. Critics shredded it immediately, with Variety calling it a flatline in every sense, and Rolling Stone saying it sucks the life out of its own concept. Rotten Tomatoes gave it one of its harshest scores, while audiences laughed at how boring the trailers looked. The studio plastered Page across every ad, thinking indie credibility from Juno and Inception would sell a popcorn thriller. Instead, audiences yawned, stayed home, and the reboot was dead before it started. What should have been a cult classic revival became a case study in how to miscast your way into irrelevance. Hari Nef was pushed as the breakout star of Assassination Nation, a satire about internet culture that critics claimed was sharp and timely. In reality, audiences thought it was a chaotic lecture dressed up as a thriller. Variety noted it preaches louder than it entertains, while Reddit threads dismissed it as a 2-hour Twitter thread on film. Marketing leaned hard on its progressive ensemble, but when you sell a movie as a homework assignment instead of entertainment, nobody shows up. Within weeks, theaters were empty. Nef's supposed breakout moment evaporated, and audiences made it clear. They didn't reject inclusivity, they rejected being preached at while sitting through a mess of a plot. Zoe Luna. Then came The Craft legacy, Blumhouse's attempt to revive a beloved 90s cult classic with a new, diverse coven. Zoe Luna was promoted as a milestone for trans representation in witchcraft cinema, but audiences saw through the spell immediately. Critics rolled their eyes, calling it a spell with no magic. Fans of the original mocked it as a checklist of woke talking points instead of a story. Horror forums complained the new witches had zero charisma, and Luna's wooden performance became an easy target. The marketing leaned so hard on diversity milestones that it forgot to sell scares, fun, or nostalgia. Instead of reigniting a franchise, the reboot exposed how badly studios can misjudge the difference between cultural signals and audience desires. Indya Moore's addition to Escape Room Tournament of Champions was hyped as the fresh edge the franchise needed after the surprise success of the first movie. Instead, audiences treated it as filler. Critics shrugged, calling the sequel uninspired and a puzzle not worth solving. Moore's character Brianna was supposed to stand out, but fans on horror forums dismissed her as forgettable, even joking the film should have been called Escape Room Tournament of Extras. The marketing bragged about how diverse the new cast was, but horror fans care about tension and clever traps, not hashtags. Instead of electrifying the franchise, the sequel drained it, and Moore's Hollywood momentum fizzled out alongside it. Quintessa Swindell. DC's Black Adam was supposed to change the hierarchy of power. Instead, it changed the hierarchy of flops. The studio hyped Quintessa Swindell as Cyclone, calling it groundbreaking representation, but audiences barely noticed. On screen, she did little more than spin CGI wind while floating in slow motion surrounded by digital leaves. Twitter roasted the entrance scene as laughably pointless, with fans joking her real superpower was putting people to sleep. Critics didn't hold back either, branding the movie a loud, empty spectacle, and one of the most hollow superhero debuts ever made. Cyclone's role, introduced with big promises in interviews, amounted to little more than filler, leaving fans scratching their heads over why she was there at all. Instead of energizing the story, her presence underscored how bloated and empty the film already felt. Swindell was pushed as a milestone, but in practice, she became a symbol of everything wrong with the project. A character designed more for marketing than storytelling, lost in a movie that was already collapsing under its own weight. But nothing compares to the meltdown of Ezra Miller's The Flash. This was supposed to be the film that reset DC's entire universe, the one that would finally put everything back on track. What audiences got was chaos. Rotten Tomatoes barely called it passable. Critics noted it buckles under its own lead, and fans tore it to shreds online. Memes of Miller's uncanny CGI doubles exploded across social media, overshadowing the film itself. Reddit threads called their performance painfully distracting, while nostalgic viewers admitted Michael Keaton's Batman comeback was wasted in the mess. The studio leaned heavily on nostalgia and tried to spin Miller as redeemable, but audiences hadn't forgotten the endless controversies. Instead of excitement, most viewers walked in expecting a disaster, and the movie delivered exactly that. What should have been a superhero coronation turned into career combustion, remembered not for bold storytelling, but for a lead performance that drained the life out of the reset. The Flash didn't sprint forward, it crawled to the finish line, carrying Miller's implosion on its back. Laverne Cox was marketed as part of the Modern Angels universe in the 2019 reboot of Charlie's Angels. In reality, it was a blink-and-you-miss-it cameo packaged like a centerpiece. Critics called the film a hollow empowerment exercise, with The Guardian saying it felt like a corporate checklist of girl power slogans, and IndieWire pointing out it confuses representation with storytelling. Fans mocked the movie for leaning harder on Cox's interviews than her actual role, and nostalgia for the early 2000s films grew stronger by comparison. Instead of reviving the Angels brand, the reboot reminded everyone how much better the old version was, and Cox's presence felt like just another marketing ploy. Jaime Clayton. Universal's The Snowman was supposed to be the next great Nordic noir. Instead, it turned into one of the decade's biggest cinematic punchlines. Jaime Clayton's role was small but heavily hyped in interviews as proof of progressive casting. The final product was a disaster. Critics branded it a jumbled mess and unintentionally hilarious. Audiences online mocked its incoherence, with one viral tweet calling it the most confusing thriller since The Room. Clayton's scenes felt wedged in, adding nothing to a story already collapsing under its own weight. What should have been a prestige thriller turned into international embarrassment, and Clayton's big studio moment disappeared in the snowstorm. And then there was Lysette, positioned as a trailblazer with the indie drama Monica in 2022. The film premiered at Venice to polite applause and was showered with festival press about its historic casting. But when it came to theaters, nobody showed up. Box office numbers barely registered, with less than 500,000 worldwide. Critics gave it warm praise for sensitivity, but mainstream audiences had no idea it even existed. A24 barely promoted it, and what was supposed to be a watershed moment for trans representation instead became invisible overnight. The cruel truth was clear. Hollywood treated it as a headline, not a movie, and once the festivals ended, so did the conversation. What ties all of these disasters together isn't just identity politics. It's lazy filmmaking disguised as progress. Studios use these actors as marketing tools instead of building compelling characters or telling good stories. They banked on hashtags instead of scripts, critics' pull quotes instead of audience word of mouth. And every time, audiences reminded them that representation doesn't sell tickets on its own. Entertainment does. Elliot Page's Flatliners was lifeless. Hari Neff's Assassination Nation collapsed under its own message. Zoe Luna's Craft Legacy alienated fans old and new. Indya Moore's Escape Room 2 fizzled into nothing. Quintessa Swindell's Black Adam drowned in CGI leaves. Ezra Miller's The Flash detonated an entire franchise. Laverne Cox's Charlie's Angels cameo was marketed harder than it mattered. Jaime Clayton's Snowman melted before anyone cared, and Lysette's Monica disappeared without a ripple. The irony is that audiences have shown they'll embrace diversity when it's paired with genuine storytelling. Amazon's Has Been Hotel leaned fully into unapologetic queer characters and still became a global streaming hit. Why? Because it was authentic, entertaining, and confident in its vision. The politics weren't the problem. The problem is when politics are the only thing. Hollywood's refusal to learn this lesson means more expensive bombs are guaranteed. They can blame toxic fans, conservative critics, or cultural backlash all they want. The truth is simpler. People don't buy tickets for activism. They buy tickets for movies that entertain them. Until the industry remembers that, the careers of woke actors will keep crashing faster than their box office receipts. That's every woke trans actor career flop explained in 11 minutes. Want to see more Hollywood disasters broken down? Hit subscribe, drop a comment, and tell me which meltdown should be next. Because in Hollywood, there's always another train wreck waiting around the corner.